Good evening, good evening, good evening. I am Fred Feliciano, the CEO of Critical Conversations HR. And today we will be going over I quit when it's time to walk away. For those of you who don't know me, I've been in the field of human resources for 25 years. I've been in the trenches with you. I've been the one to terminate people. I've been the one to lay people off. I've been the one to have employees crying in my office, telling me their stories. So I'm here to share my expertise with you. So today we will be going over when it's time to walk away. So before we go into the reasons as to why people should walk away from a job, I think I wanted to go over first a belief system. Some people have the belief that quitting is a bad thing, and I don't necessarily believe that. I think in people's personal lives, they stay in bad relationships. They stay in these relationships that don't benefit them personally. And the same thing happens professionally. People stay involved, people stay committed to something that is not working for them. So, in my experience, I believe that females tend to stay longer in a bad situation in terms of their work, in terms of their career. They're more likely to stick it out. And I believe in part there's guilt around potentially leaving a bad relationship because of the relationships they have with their coworkers. There's something called survivor guilt, which many people do not want to feel. But when they leave a situation, they're afraid that they're going to be ostracized, and they'll be looked down upon because they left, and they ended up leaving their friends behind. Another belief that people have in terms of quitting is bad. People have the fear that if they're at a job for a short period of time, it's going to look very bad on their resume. So, my experience is that people will understand. Everyone, well, I can't say everyone, but a lot of people, you might be one of them if you're out there listening to this. You may be someone that you've been in a very bad situation. In those situations, I'm going to outline in a couple of minutes, but you may have been in a very bad situation and you said, you know what, this work relationship is not benefiting me and I have to leave. So my opinion is that people do understand. What they're afraid of is when people start to see patterns on your resume of you being with an employer for a short period of time. You only get so many opportunities for that to happen. And when people start to see a pattern that you've been at a place, let's say it's less than a year or less than a year and a half, 2 years, everyone has their own threshold of what is considered short term. If you ask someone what is their definition of a short term relationship, somebody may say a week, someone else may say a year. Someone who's been in long term relationships in terms of personal throughout their life, they may say 5 years is short term, 2 years. It all depends on the person, and it's very subjective. Whenever you have a belief, right, you always need to question your beliefs and ask, is this belief working for me? Is this belief working for me? So if you believe that it's bad to stay at a place of employment, it's bad to leave a place of employment within a certain amount of months or a year, you have to ask yourself, how is that belief working for me? And do I need to change that belief? So one reason why it's okay to walk away and quit is because the job is not what you expected. Again, the job is not what you expected. Now, the first piece of the job is not what you expected. I want to focus on the person, on the self, okay? because I've seen this throughout my 25 years of doing human resources and managing people, making job offers, spearheading the interview process. I typically will see a lack of due diligence, and that means that the candidate did not dissect the job description. And when I say that they did not dissect the job description, they did not go through every single bullet point or ask questions in terms of what the roles and responsibilities are. And sometimes, believe it or not, people don't even question the job description during the interview process. They don't question it. And it might be because they're desperate for a job. So therefore, they lack the due diligence and they get into a situation that's not beneficial to them. So in terms of the job was not what you expected. In part, it might be because the job changes. So understand that it is legally acceptable, with the exception of if you're part of you have a collective bargaining agreement in place, or you have some sort of contract. Your employer can change your job description with or without notice. And what may end up happening is the role no longer plays on your strengths. And in fact, there's a lot of weaknesses that you may have that this new job description is exposing. Another aspect of the job not being what you expected is that the workload increases significantly. And that interferes with you having a work-life balance. And what you'll find when the workload increases and it's becoming unbearable or too much for you to do, the quality of your work is going to decrease. The quality of your work decreases, and that's unfortunately is a reflection on you. And it doesn't mean that it's not that your reason is not justified, but when you start producing work and the quality has significantly decreased, that could be a reason why it's time for you to go, because the workload is not being managed effectively. In terms of the job not being what you expected, I do believe that everyone has an obligation to themselves, if not to their managers, to have a certain level of communication. So there needs to be efforts in communicating with your direct manager about the issues you're facing with the job and with the job description that you currently have. One thing that's important for you to understand in terms of your role is that this might be a specific season in which the workload might be increased, or this level of work may only be performed at a certain season. So this may not be a long-term thing. Okay. One thing that's common that we see, and sometimes this is more of a band-aid, is that a lot of employers or an employee can ask for a salary increase or a stipend because of additional responsibilities, or because the job has increased in scope. Okay. Another thing to communicate with your supervisor, with your manager, is the impact the work is having on the organization, the clients, and most importantly, you. If you're able to connect any financial numbers to the change of the job description and how the increased workload decreases profitability, I would lead with that, because in most cases, employers care about the financial bottom line of the organization. And or you may have a manager that really cares more about the clients and your customers. Another reason why people leave, why it's okay to quit, is for personal reasons. Now, that's a very general, vague answer. So I'll go into some circumstances that fall into personal reasons. And this is not an exhaustive list by any means. These are just some examples of personal reasons why you may want to leave. One is you're having health issues. And as we know, Health is the most important thing in your life. If you don't have that, you don't have anything. In some cases, you've been at a job and it's been a short amount of time, um, and you're not eligible for. It's actually not COBRA. That's a typo there. It's what I meant to put down is family medical leave. You don't qualify for family medical leave because you've been at the employer for a short period of time. Another sub point of a health issue is the stress that's induced by the role. You might be in a very stressful situation. I'm familiar with many, and I'm telling you this, many individuals who have had panic attacks, depression because of their role, and that obviously goes into your personal life. So, health issues, you may not be eligible for family medical leave, and the stress that this job is causing you, and you may not have a way of managing that. So either you deal with stress by trying to minimize that stress, or you attempt to cut it off. Another reason that falls under personal reasons is the commute and parking. Many candidates, in my experience, I've seen this happen before. They interview at an organization, and guess what? They don't do it. They don't travel to the employer during the commuting time, and instead they have, let's say, an 11 o'clock appointment or 2 o'clock appointment. And then when they actually start the job, they see that their commute might even be doubled. It might even be tripled because of traffic. Another reason that falls under commuting is parking. You might be at a place where parking is absolutely horrible, and you have to deal with alternate side of the street parking. I worked at a place before where we had alternate side of the street parking, and you had to move your car by a certain time, and you had to double park. And we had a whole bunch of employees, including me, who had their car hit and had to get our cars fixed because people just don't care. And this happened in New Jersey. Okay, so some people don't want to deal with that. Some people don't want to deal with parking. They don't want to deal with commuting, and that's fair because that may increase your travel time, the time you spend trying to find parking. Another reason falls under personal, strictly family issues. You may have some issues of domestic violence. You may have issues of, incarceration of a family member, dealing with, obstacles and your job. This may not be the time for you to work this job because you have something more pressing to deal with. And the last thing under personal reasons is the inability for flexibility. Let's say you have children. Let's say you're caring for an aging parent, and there's a certain level of flexibility you would like to take your loved one to their medical appointments or to bring your kid to school. And the place that you're working for does not offer you that flexibility. They're pretty rigid. Every employer has the right to dictate what their schedule is. Outside of someone making a reasonable accommodation because of a disability issue or health issue, which I'm not talking about, the employer has the right to dictate a schedule. So hopefully you work for an organization where you can have flexibility, but that's not always the case. And that may be a deal breaker for you. And if that is, there's nothing wrong with that. Again, it is what it is. So the work environment, I'll jump to that. And when I speak about the work environment, I'm talking about the physical work environment. An office versus a cubicle, sharing an office. You will be very surprised how many people accept a role and do not even see where they will be working. Again, a lot of people don't even see where they will be working. They've interviewed Maybe they went to headquarters. Maybe they met their supervisor, their boss at a Panera Bread or a Starbucks, or maybe it was virtual. And then when they come to the actual environment, they're surprised that they're sharing an office with someone, or they're in a cubicle, and they absolutely hate it. They don't have privacy. I totally understand. If this is a deal breaker for you, you need to ask about this very early on, and you need to visit the business while it is in session, and you need to see where you will be working. People spend more time at work sometimes than they actually do in their home awake. So you need to be comfortable where you are working. And I would strongly recommend, do not accept a job unless you've seen where you will be working from. Even if it's a couple of days a week, you want to see it, you want to experience it during the natural working times, so you know what's what. Another reason to leave an organization, to say I quit, is because of values. Now, either the organization won't have any clearly defined values, and I don't care what size business or organization you have, every organization should have a list of core values that dictates how your employees do your work. If not, you have to work on that. You have to work on that. So a reason to leave is because the organization doesn't have any values, or the values are truly not in practice. It's something on paper only, and the values are not evidenced. You can walk through the organization and deal with people, and the values don't come out. People play lip service to it. So if you find that your organization's values are not in line with yours, that they're opposed, I do not recommend staying unless you are a senior leader and you have influence to catapult change. You need to be a senior leader in that organization, have a certain level of influence to really change the culture. If you're not in that position, the probability that you can truly change the culture is slim. It's not impossible. It's not impossible. But to be realistic, you need to have a certain level of influence. If you don't have it in your role, I don't recommend staying. Another reason to leave your employer and to say, I quit, to give your walking papers, is because you are in an openly hostile environment. So an openly hostile environment is there's a culture of disrespect. There's a culture of blaming. Going back to disrespect, it's profanity, cursing, yelling, a culture of blaming. Going back to the second bullet point, another openly hostile environment, in my opinion, is one that in which there is no accountability. That's an extremely hostile situation because everyone's placing blame when it's easy to hold people accountable if you have the right manager. Ultimately, these characteristics outline an abusive environment. And when there's no change in sight, maybe you don't have the influence. Maybe you don't have good HR people. Maybe you have HR people that are yes people. They just say yes, and they go along to get along. A lot of people have fear. If there's no change in sight, leave the environment. You walk away, and that's how you voice your disdain for a company, is truly by leaving. Another reason why you would say, I quit, and you walk away is when you start seeing you are being placed on progressive discipline. Now, progressive discipline is correction that goes from informal to formal. And by the way, if you're an employer, I do have a progressive discipline system on my website. You can go to criticalconversationshr.com/store, where you can purchase my progressive discipline system. But going back to the topic, progressive discipline for the employee, you will see that a paper trail begins to emerge. Okay. You may have the feeling that there's a lot of nitpicking. Now, in some cases, it might be warranted because I've worked for organizations where I've coached managers to place people on progressive discipline, verbal, reminders, written reminders, suspensions, performance improvement plans. I've done all of that. And typically HR will be the facilitator of that process. Now, one thing that everyone should do, there should be a level of self-reflection where you truly ask yourself, is this discipline warranted against me? Okay. You have to ask yourself, am I doing what this documentation is saying that I'm doing? Have I been given the proper chance? Have I been given the proper training? If you feel that, what you're receiving is warranted, then by all means improve. Improve your performance, get better, take the feedback, and be a better employee. But if you feel that the progressive discipline is not warranted and the progressive discipline just begins to compound and get more and more and more frequently, then just understand that eventually this is a sign to you that you will be terminated. What you should do is obviously update your resume, find another job, and quit before you get terminated. In another video, I spoke about employers giving a neutral reference. Most employers are not going to talk about why you left that organization. Most employers have a policy that they only confirm dates of employment and title. Many won't even give salary, which is great. That's fine. So, but the reality is, because I have to be realistic with all of you and say that sometimes people do talk. Okay. People do give an unauthorized reference. People will call up another organization. They'll call up the CFO, CEO, HR person. And I'm hoping that if they contact an HR person, they're smart enough not to say anything, not to give any information, and just confirm the dates of employment and title if they have a signed authorization. But the reality is that people do talk, even though it's not authorized. People do talk. So if you have the opportunity to leave, to resign before you get terminated, my advice is always quit, submit your resignation formally so that they don't terminate your employment. And lastly, drum roll, the last reason why you should leave is a bad boss. That is the number one reason. I think, in my opinion, 98% of people who leave roles is because they have a bad boss. Now, everyone has their own tolerance level for mistreatment. So, in terms of a bad boss, what I've identified as some characteristics of a bad boss is someone that they won't have any separation of work and personal time. Right? They'll reach out to you after hours. Things may not be urgent. So my only exception to that is that if you make a mistake and you have a manager reaching out to you about that mistake, then you should clean it up. But hopefully the issue is urgent, and it should not be one that can wait until the next day. Excuse me. Another characteristic of a bad boss, their communication style. They're a yeller. They scream. They belittle. They blame, and they have favorites. Another characteristic of a bad boss is when there's no accountability. Your manager holds no one accountable for the work that they're doing. That's a horrible boss, and that's someone that you do not want to work for. If you have a bad boss, you should start looking. You should clean up your resume and see what the market has for you. Ultimately, if you do feel comfortable, you should have a conversation with your manager, because it might be this person has never received feedback before. Now, if you need assistance on how to have that conversation, I can make myself available to you. Again, the website is www.criticalconversationshr.com. My information is down below. You have my email, my phone number, and if you have any questions about having a conversation with your manager, by all means reach out and let's have that conversation. So ultimately, in terms of when it's time to go, you have to do what's best for you in your career. No one is going to look out for you. In most cases, your coworkers. In most cases, your current manager. But although it's possible to get an amazing manager who truly cares about you personally, professionally, and they want to see you grow, that is possible. That does happen. Doesn't happen that often, but it does happen. I think in most cases, people have, bad to okay managers. But if you do have an amazing boss, tell them that you value them, appreciate them, and they should appreciate you for the work that you do. So I want to thank you for being a part of this live stream. If I can be of service to you, my contact information is below. Take care, stay safe, and continue to have those critical conversations in the workplace. And if I can help you in any way, reach out. Take care. God bless.